Is it on there? All right.
Nothing yet,
Hmm. Yeah, it's doing the
but it
same
could
thing
just
it
be a
did last
delay
week.
getting it up.
I know that's what I'm thinking. It's doing the same thing it did last week. So, but I think like turning it off and back on again last week probably
Oh,
didn't
I
do us any favors.
see.
So,
Hang on. I've got an ad before it starts.
oh, can't wait. Let us know what they're advertising.
It's a COVID-19 ad.
No, no thanks then.
Apparently, COVID-19 is PR now. It's,
No, that seems
oh, we're
wildly
up. We're up.
unnecessary.
We're up. We're up.
All right, sounds good. All right, I will start us off here in a moment.
Yeah, YouTube has gotten ridiculous with the ads anymore.
All right, I'm gonna go live now, or I'm gonna start recording now. We are live. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 186th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 641st episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, September 10th, 2020. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Well, the banner moment, again, proves a little bit tough to find on another slow news week, but I think on the recruiting trail at least, the easy pick for this one is Trey Kaufman putting IU in his final five, along with North Carolina, Virginia, Indiana State, and Purdue. For some reason here, Jared listed Purdue first, which makes no sense to me, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think any of these were a huge surprise. There were word out this week that Kaufman and the family took unofficial visits to North Carolina and Virginia. No IU's been heavily after him from the get-go. So really, at this point, it's just a question of what decision he's going to make. I think the notion of being able to go through a normal recruiting cycle with visits and all of that is probably out the window at this point. And you have to feel good with everything that you read about IU really making him a priority for quite some time and put themselves in as good a position as possible. And so it's really just ultimately, a little bit of a waiting game to see who among that final five he's going to choose. And IU will, I'm sure, continue their pitch right up to the wire to make things happen. But he really is, as you look forward, on the recruiting calendar, he's really the first domino that will fall. And we've talked about this a little bit before. If they don't get him, I think then Mason Miller maybe springs a little bit higher up their list to try to have somebody else be able to step into the front court. But if he does say yes to IU, I think it's just another feather in Archie's recruiting cap from keeping big time talents in the state to come to IU. And so that's been an area where you don't really want to bet against Archie based on his track record in that regard so far. And I think he's the kind of guy who would fit well in the system on both ends of the floor. And so it's really just a waiting game at this point. Hopefully Trey makes a decision, and then we can get into a patented Ryan Phillips scouting report on him. So hopefully we get to that point. I know we'd all enjoy it, and that would be great news for the Hoosiers. And with that, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he's a man who needs no introduction. He's long been known as the voice of the IU fan, and he's now the voice alongside Zach Osterman on Mind Your Banners. He is Chronic Hoosier, and we don't have an intro song. The best and the only drop that I have of Chronic is this one.
Can a brother get some coupons?
So I don't really know that that's fitting in any way, but I thought, if we're gonna have intro songs for everybody else, then that's as good as it gets. So, Chronic, thanks for joining us tonight, and just glad to hear you're doing well. We chatted a little bit before we got on here, but any lingering thoughts from what has been by far the most bizarre IU offseason any of us have ever seen?
We were talking about it earlier. It's right now. It's just it. I didn't recognize how much I needed something to talk about other than all these traumas suffering our nation and our country, our world, really. But to see sports come back, to have we do so many IU podcasts, and actually to have new IU content other than, just are we shut down? Are we, practicing again, what have you? It's just nice to return to some semblance of normal, to have those personal escapes that we all rely on, and, to make some of those connections that sports have brought us. That's one thing, and Zach wrote about it earlier this summer, just how much of our culture, our society, but especially our friendships and our families, how we partake in sports together, and just what a void that's left since this has all been gone. So glad to be, another step closer to getting back to whatever the new normal looks like. Glad to be here. Always happy to jump back on with you guys.
And to my right,
analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never did a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
he is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what's your rant on the last week in sports, or are you just going to double down on your rant against Asheville, North Carolina being the potential Maui site? Although we do have a new potential contender for that we'll discuss later in the show, but I didn't know if you had been able to move on, or if you're still struggling with that one a little bit.
I'm still struggling that it's not Maui. Yes. But first of all, welcome to Chronic. We always love having Chronic on. I was going to rant about the ACC essentially inventing the conference tournament this week. They're saying they want to do a massive tournament where everybody gets involved. It's like, well, isn't that what conference tournaments are for? To weed those early things out instead. Now they just want everybody to make the tournament. And I did love some of the stories coming out that, Coach K was for it and everybody else just decided it's not worth arguing with him. I think that's a really dumb idea. I get that, if there aren't if there aren't non-conference games, it might be hard to weed people out. But I mean, just have conference tournaments and have, select a certain amount from each conference that are getting in and play the conference tournaments to give the people who don't make that list a chance to jump in, and then just have a normal tournament. I don't understand why we have to do radical ideas here. Just give the people the normal tournament they want. With the conference tournaments doing their thing to weed out the potential contenders. So I thought that was just a crazy proposal. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the news segment.
Yeah, it's already two times I wished I had other drops of Chronic, and I wish I had your series of things about Krzyzewski. So here we are, not too long into the show, already filled with regret for not having some of these. But we'll make do. Maybe you'll make new ones as we talk about that a little bit further here in a minute.
I would bet heavily on that.
Yeah, good. So this week we will, as Ryan mentioned, go through some Hoosier headlines, including that odd, at best, idea that the ACC floated out this week that has already been shot down. And then with content a little dry, we opened things up and asked for questions to do an AMA about anything, and you obliged. So we got a handful of questions, actually quite a few that came in. So we'll try to hit as many of those as we can later here in the show. So that will all be later on this edition of the Assembly Call Radio. And before we get to that, a quick announcement to please continue to support our friends at Homefield. You can use the promo code Assembly20 to save 20% on your entire order there. I believe they're moving on from rolling out Syracuse last week. I think Auburn looks to be up this week, so they continue to put out a lot of great products. Again, I've vowed not to buy any of the Syracuse stuff, although there were some cool designs there, but I just can't do it. So, but anyway, continue to support those guys. They're doing an awesome job rolling out new schools every single week, and super comfortable stuff. And looking forward to wearing some of the new sweatshirts that I bought over the summer here as things cool down a little bit as we head into fall. All right, so who's your headlines, guys? The first one, this happened on Friday, so this is about a week old at this point, but it has happened since we did the show. Workouts at IU were paused after a positive test. It was not specified which programs the test came from, but it was men's basketball, men's soccer, wrestling, and field hockey. So, I think to a certain extent, starting things up, that's somewhat of an inevitability, given everything that we've seen so far. But, Ryan, what's your initial reaction to that? Does that make you feel any better or worse about the season happening? Is it just, something that we're going to have to be comfortable with and I don't know. What was your initial reaction to seeing that things got shut down?
Well, I mean, if you're going to have workouts in this environment, you're probably going to wind up having some positive tests, especially with college kids. I mean, Major League Baseball and then the two bubble scenarios have largely contained things. I think I mean, obviously there were some, mistakes with Major League Baseball with the Marlins and the Cardinals having issues and a couple other teams as well. But for the most part, things have been pretty well contained with the ton of testing. And look, if you're going to do this with college kids in a college town, somebody's going to break the rules. Somebody's going to get it, and then they're going to spread it. And that's going to happen. If we've all decided this is what we're going to do, and we're going to have sports and we're going to have workouts and getting these guys ready for a season, this is going to happen. I'm not, other schools have certainly had it worse than Indiana. Other schools we've learned were not even following the protocols and not even caring about it and encouraging students not to bring it up when they, felt symptoms coming on and things like that. I feel better about it in Indiana than other places, but this is the danger of doing this. And so, yes, it's correct. It's obviously right that they paused workouts if this is happening and get everybody to shut down and quarantine and all that. But, this is going to come with the territory. As long as this is going on, people are going to get it. And they've just got to be responsible as much as possible.
So, Chronic, I'm interested in your thoughts on that, but maybe even just more generally, being in Bloomington, seeing what the university is doing as students have come back to campus. Just your overall impressions of kind of how campus life is moving on, how it's impacted. Just any thoughts that you have from being there a lot closer to it than either of us are.
It's such a wild time everywhere around the world. But when you look at universities and what they do and what universities communities look like, it's just so incredibly complex and difficult and challenging. And then it's just such a complicated situation right now. And honestly, the more that it continues to go on and we see successes here and failures there and all the criticism that comes along with it, like a lot of businesses, like a lot of institutions, universities have really been put in a no-win situation in so many different ways. It's really difficult to do what they're trying to do. And at the end of the day, COVID seems to be highly transmissible via shared air, aerosols and whatnot. And, so many people, it's easy for the outside. You focus on, well, the classrooms and we're going to distance and all this and everything else. And you forget what the whole experience looks like. And, so little of the total college experience actually takes place in a classroom. And so much of it happens outside. So much of this town and what makes Bloomington such a wonderful place to be happens indoors, restaurants, clubs, and everything else, and sporting events. And just, we like to gather in that age group. It just makes it so incredibly difficult. And, just this weekend, you've got, every time you see large crowds, there's images popping up on social media, and, the discussion is so bifurcated and really just so polarizing that it misses all the nuance. And yes, there's really no way to go about it entirely safely. Yes, there's a lot of people, students included, and I think they get a rap for a lot of this, that this is either all their fault or they're the ones getting totally robbed by the whole deal. At the end of the day, man, we would actually have a record enrollment in IU this year, but for the fact that we lost a lot of international students due to the travel restrictions that have really taken over the globe. People want to be back. If you believe in market economics, the demand is absolutely there for the on-campus experience. And I think, from what I've seen close hand, a lot of people put a boatload of effort into making this happen as safely and as smartly as possible. And yes, it's very much a fragile situation. And yes, it's one of those things that every single day and every choice that every person on campus makes contributes to the overall well-being of it. And I see the vast majority of people really being smart and kind and respectful to the other people around them. At the end of the day too, every time you turn around, you see something that is a dangerous or a risky situation. And as we've seen with the Greek houses and the situation that's unfolded there, it's really put everything on campus right on a precipice. It's put the whole community on a precipice. I mean, our community schools are right on the verge, based off the positivity rate in the community, of having to close back down, having just opened, having just put an entire summer of effort into making this happen. So a lot of kudos for a lot of people to get us this far. But the challenge with this thing is it's not like tomorrow's any easier than today or yesterday it was. Every day the challenge is omnipresent, as you see with the athletic teams having to shut down. And those kids are so incredibly well resourced and invested in what they're trying to do. And it just proves how incredibly difficult it is, to go about in an open society, as even with our restrictions, and still stay as healthy as we can throughout it. So I wish more folks could recognize the complexity and what the vast majority of people are doing and trying to do to make not just school or sports, but just to keep everybody well throughout all of this. So the kids are all right, man. They're all right.
Well said. All right, so Brian alluded to this. So the ACC this week floated this idea, put out a statement about having a tournament with all teams being included. I think, as Ryan said, as other things have floated out about it, it seemed like there were a few voices in the room that wanted to push for it, and then everybody else just didn't want to bother because they probably assumed that it would get shut down anyway, and rightfully so, because it already really has been. I think one of the things that came up, and I think it was Gary Parrish who brought this up on the CBS podcast this week, is that if that part of this might be born out of the ACC and certainly potentially other leagues playing conference only schedules, and it's going to be really hard to do any number of things to establish where your conference sits in the pecking order without that. So then let's give ourselves a chance to get as many teams in as possible by further in the tournament by doing it that way. I think there's probably some truth to that, and it still remains to be seen how different leagues are going to handle this. But overall, the idea seemed just patently absurd, really on every level, from the logistics of making it work to different things where, and it's like, well, just have conference tournaments. I mean, essentially that's what you have today in order to be able to do it. I cannot imagine the notion of seeding. This is not even from a bracketology perspective. This is just from a common sense, how would you do this perspective of how you're going to seed those teams and set all this up and whatever else.
Do you think it would be crazy for 1 year just to do a random draw like they do in European soccer or something like that? I mean, all these teams make it. If you win your conference tournament, you get put into one, or you win your conference, you get put into one pod or whatever, and everybody else is just a random draw. Do you think that's, I mean, I know it kind of takes your job out of the window, but
I don't know. It would be, well, I'm making tons of money off that.
Yeah,
so that would really
you
be
are.
a huge
I mean,
blow.
it's,
it would be, that would be disappointing, but
you'd have to give up putting the third story on your house. I get it, but it's
obviously we would do the, I think you could, I think you could kind of tier the teams and maybe have, certain ones, but at that point you might as well just seed it out anyway and do some of that. There are challenges. There are 100% challenges to not playing non-conference games because it makes the process that they use to evaluate the teams inherently more difficult. So that part of it I get. I'm just not sure that the solution should be, or even could be having everybody get in. So that one just struck me as just nuts. So I don't know, Ryan, if you had any other thoughts about your pal Coach K's role in this whole thing, or any lingering thoughts on it that you didn't hit earlier.
I just thought it was a silly proposal. I mean, I get the thinking behind it, again, as we talked about, but I mean, it logistically makes no sense. And there's ways to eliminate. I mean, it would be one thing if they proposed the top, whatever, 100 and something teams that finished above 500, but you want to include teams that go like 2-25 in the NCAA tournament. That's just silly. So, I just thought the whole thing was kind of a joke.
Yeah, I mean, even if the thought is that you're trying to find other ways to make additional ad money off of it or whatever, like nobody's going to watch some of these other games that are. It's the same reason that they're not televising the quarterfinals of the SWAC tournament, because nobody's going to watch. Even though I've probably watched that on a stream at some point in the not too distant past, but that's neither here nor there. But I think you're just not going to have a quality product. And then for all the things that college basketball gets kind of chopped down for in terms of, not being as good as the NBA, which is absolutely true, but not, not having that quality product, it really gets watered down at that point, in my view. One other thing to hit was three-man weave. They released our top 100 players, I think, at some point in the last day or two. Trace actually came in at number 11, which I was pleasantly surprised to see. Chronic, you buying Trace as a top 15, I guess top 12 guy in college basketball this year?
Man, the kid absolutely performed last season. I think that's probably a lot to put on his shoulders coming into a sophomore year, but I could totally justify it as well. The thing it's most fascinating to me about that is I think so far the highest expectation I've seen of Trace on the national level. And I imagine there's going to be more of it coming in as time goes on and the season draws near. But I'll be real curious to see how he handles that. It's not just the accolades, the additional leadership that he's going to be expected from him. He did it in production, but now when you're the guy in the spotlight every single game, it's just a whole new challenge he's going to have to navigate as the season goes on. But I totally think he's up for it, and I totally think this is a year that could very much showcase his skill set.
Yeah, it should be a good one. It's exciting. It's one of the many reasons that you hope the season is able to happen, because it's returning a guy who showed so much as a freshman and an off season to get in additional work and refine the additional parts of his game that we all want to see him expand on. It is really exciting, and having one of those guys who is a top player coming back is always exciting and something that you hope can propel IU into the tournament, into a good seed. So. All right. Well, with that, we'll take a quick break here, and then it's Ask Us Anything time. So with IU Hoops news pretty slow, we put out a call for questions about anything, and you guys obliged, so we'll see how this goes and answer those questions when we come back. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All righty.
How many Padres questions did we get? I didn't look.
I think only the one from Joel.
Hey folks, if you need a bandwagon baseball team to follow, join the Padres bandwagon. It's so much fun. They're so much fun. It's great. It's like the first time since 1998 that I actually feel excited to turn on a Padres game every night.
Well, I'm happy. I'm happy for you, as I know
I appreciate
your hometown teams have not treated you well over the course
They
of
have
time.
not.
So I won't take your joy.
I felt personally
with how they're
insulted
doing.
by my hometown teams for a long time, and this is first time in a while I can actually take some joy in San Diego sports.
You're talking to a Cubs fan here, so spare me.
I get it. Yeah, I'm with you.
And I'm just waiting for the collapse this season. They started so strong, and
Hey, you got your title though, I will say, and that
don't
was
get me wrong. I said I would trade a lifetime of sports memories just for one, so I'm not going to complain.
And quite frankly, you guys got it in a good one too. It wasn't like it was an easy sweep or whatever. You got the cathartic battle back, win it in Game 7. I mean, that was an amazing title to win.
Rain delay and all.
Yeah.
And what city was that in, Andy?
I don't know. I think I was still there at that. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't.
No, I think you were in
what year-
Cincinnati.
Yeah, I was thinking. I think I still moved back here.
Gotcha.
I have no ties to Cleveland. You're not going to hurt my feelings by saying bad things about
everybody I know from Cleveland
by
has the exact same thing. So I
any
cannot blame you not being from Cleveland for taking anything said about Cleveland.
There are many people I met there who would take exception to a lot of those things, but I never was.
What's funny is I have obviously I went to IU, so I have 80 friends who are Cubs fans, and I had always kind of been like, God, they're kind of annoying. They whine a lot. They complain a lot. I mean, not that I don't do all those things, but when somebody else does it, it gets to you. And I was kind of like, you know what? Kind of in a sick way. I was kind of like, I don't care if they win a title this year. And then I found myself in that series I want them to win. I got to the point where in Game 7 I was cheering for them.
See, I was the same way with Boston when they finally broke the ice. And I, growing up in Indiana, your DNA says you have to hate everything Boston.
Yes.
Post Larry Bird. Very much love the Larry years, but I same situation. And then they just stayed good, and I was like, this is repulsive.
Well,
so the thing I'll say though is, Cubs fans, you knew they were insufferable when they lose. Turns out they're pretty insufferable when they win too. So they stay on brand, good or bad.
But so my family, my parents met in Boston. Their first date was a Boston college football game. They both kind of grew up all over, but they settled in the Northeast and both became big Red Sox fans. My mom's dad was born after the Red Sox won their last title, and died without seeing them win a championship, and was a diehard Boston sports fan. So I was rooting for the Red Sox to win a title finally. Like my whole family were Red Sox fans, and I just felt it every year, and then they finally won one. Once they won one and they were still good, it wasn't like a blip and then they were bad, and so once they won, then I was like, all right, you guys, forget you. But the one title in 2004, I was definitely there for. Plus beating the Yankees, anyone who beats the Yankees gets my heart.
But they were so good so quickly for so long after that people
I know
forgot how cursed they were for everywhere.
Oh, like, totally. You don't even remember
that bucket now.
Yeah, you don't even remember. All right. Padres are up 3-0 early, folks. Just for your update.
Reds Cubs, I think, is just starting after.
Are they back?
Delay, I think.
They were in delay.
I think I got something popped up on my phone that they're getting ready to start. Although the Reds got their gem from Bauer last night, so they'll surely collapse. There was some stat that the Reds are like, if they score 3 or more runs, have like a pretty solid record, and they're 0-15. I think when they score less than that, they are just absolutely terrible hitting team.
It's probably right. Cubs bats have been so cold this year.
Yeah, and it's weird. They have so much talent.
They have so much power, and it's just not getting uncorked.
It's a weird year, though. I mean, there are so many guys who consistently perform really well who are not. Like Bellinger was hitting like 220 last I saw. Like, I mean, it's the start, stop, restart thing has affected so many people. It's just
absolutely, and the short turnarounds.
Yeah, and playing so many games in so few days and all that. I mean, it's impacting everyone. It's going to be a weird year. I mean, it is. It's when you get to the postseason, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. All right, I'm just going to go through. I'll just kind of watch the time. I'm just going to go through in whatever order they're in here. I tried to group ones that were related together. So
yeah, we'll keep an eye on our chat, and we'll.
Yeah, we've got the better part of 30 minutes left in total, so we can probably get to all of them. So yeah, something like that. So I'll try to keep an eye on that.
Maybe 17 and a smaller lesson.
Yeah. That last one was almost 21, but not too bad. So all right, I will start recording here a second.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
All right, thank you, Christian, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Chronic Hoosier and Ryan Phillips, and tonight we just opened this up to do an AMA, so we've got a handful of questions here. I think they're largely in the order in which they were submitted, so we're just going to roll through these and hopefully can hit as many as we can here over the next 30 minutes or so. So first question is from Alex Howell. Last night there was a great NBA double overtime game in which OG hit a clutch 3, which is becoming a regular occurrence for him. What is the greatest overtime game you've watched or remember in any sport? So he gave a couple examples. Larry Moss chipping in from nowhere to steal the Masters from Greg Norman. Isner grinding it out at Wimbledon in that absurd final set. He said there was something like 45-43. I don't remember what it actually was, but I'm going to use his numbers here because at the very least it felt like that's what it was.
It was like the 4-day match or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I also threw out Suns Bulls Game 3 in the NBA Finals. So, Ryan, any games come to mind with you from an overtime perspective?
The 2014 Western Conference Finals in the NHL between the Los Angeles Kings and the Chicago Blackhawks. That was one of the best 7-game series I've ever seen, and the Kings won it in overtime on a shot from the blue line that just deflected in off somebody. It was more just, I mean, that was crazy that it ended that way, but it was also just 7 games of 2 teams playing as well as you can possibly play in hockey. And, it was a back and forth series. Somebody would take a lead. Somebody would score 2 goals. The other team would score 2 goals. It was just a great series. And then for it to end that way on a harmless shot from the perimeter that just, fluttered in, and the winner going to the Stanley Cup. That was my favorite Game 7 memory that I thought, because I just watched that game and it was you were white knuckling for the entire game. If anybody watches playoff hockey is so intense, and it's just, every second you feel like is going to be the end of the game. It just feels like, or is the most important play of the game. And so yeah, I loved that. That's the one that stands out to me for sure. I honestly thought the NBA game he's referencing the other night was one of the best overtime games I've ever seen in basketball.
Chronic, what about you? Any come to mind immediately?
Oh hell, there's honestly the primus recency of that last game was just bonkers, because maybe it's just because I haven't watched live sports in what feels like forever. That was just insane. I do agree with Ryan though. Playoff hockey is probably the best sports product on the earth. Every few seconds you have a change of possession and offensive opportunities, and dude's just absolutely blowing people up. So I absolutely concur there. I don't know. None stick out at the moment. Now I will call, since we were talking Cubs, maybe that rain delay in Cleveland. That was
Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah, that for me was probably the apex, the pinnacle of that, just that perpetual state of climax. You never know how it's going to break, and then just the cathartic release after it was finally over. I don't know that I've experienced a whole lot like that in my life.
Yeah, the one I had was another Cleveland one, but it was a Cavs game. It was I had to look up what game this actually was. It was Game 5 of the 2007, I believe, Eastern Conference Finals, when LeBron scored, I think, the last 25. I was looking this up.
I remember that.
29 of Cleveland's last 30 in their last 25 points. It was against the Pistons.
Pistons, yeah, I remember that game.
Yeah, he basically they were like the what I'm reading is the recap. He had 19 points with about 6 minutes left, and then scored 29 of the last 30 points for the Cavs over the course of the game. So that was pretty incredible. I just remember being in Cleveland. Everybody was really excited about that, and about that team and LeBron. And even though I kind of probably am a little tired of some of the complaining to the refs and some of the stuff that he gets into now, that was like a vintage performance of him early career. From a college basketball standpoint, like that Syracuse UConn game that went to however many overtimes in the Big East tournament was fairly incredible.
Game,
and they
right?
They
was
reshowed
that. Oh no, that was the Devon.
No, I think it was Devendorf, and I forget who all the particulars were. Although they reshowed it during March Madness time when the tournament got canceled, and I actually rewatched. I rewatched a good chunk of it, and it's one of those where it was like it got to the point where like the basketball wasn't even that good because you had so many guys fouling out and not playing. Everybody was just dead tired, but you couldn't really turn away from it. So that I think 6 overtime game that they had was fairly incredible. So
yeah, it was 2009, by the way, in case anyone's looking for it.
There you go. All right. Next question from Kyle Johnson. If you had to make an all-time IU team of players who were never regular starters, who would be your starting 5? So I don't know that we'll get to 5, but Chronic, any favorite reserves over the course of time in IU basketball history? I think everything would start with Laskowski. I mean, he did have the nickname the Super Sub, so I think he would have to be a part of it. But what other guys stand out to you from your time watching IU and who you love to see give a spark off the bench?
All roads lead back to Tijon, so I got to lead with that. But Laz is the obvious answer there. Who, by the way, Laz cooks a mean burger. He's got the Culvers over on the west side of town. You see John every time you go in there, and his son. It's awesome to see him in the community. It's a good burger too. No, honestly, I don't know. I saw this question when it first came up, and I really need a definition of regular starter because so many guys that I would put on that list probably didn't start for 3/4 of their career and then earned that spot as they became upperclassmen or at some point. So that really is a tough one. Again, recency bias probably. I'm going to go to the grave. One of Derek Elston's biggest fans. I love the kid. I love the energy he brought to the team. The way he just impacted the chemistry of it. AJ Moye is one of those guys that's a borderline too. I mean, I loved his game before he became, pretty regular and a starter in the rotation.
He's one I thought of. I struggled a little bit with the same way you did because so many guys were that spark guy early in their career and then worked their way into the starting lineup at the end, like a Sheehy,
I'd
somebody
say
like that. Like he came to mind for me as well.
I'd say the fair way to do this is if primarily for their career they were bench guys. If like 3 years they were a bench guy, 1 year they were a starter, I think that counts. I think that guy counts. Like Will Sheehy to me would count as a bench guy. He did start his last year, but I would count him as a bench guy during his career.
No, absolutely.
So my pick for this was Eric Sir. I loved Eric Sir.
Pepper Pot.
Yeah, the Pepper Pot. I used to, and I was in school at the same time as he was, so I wrote about him at the IDS. I loved watching him come off the bench, and he would change games, with taking a charge or hitting a shot or whatever it was. He was a hard worker who I liked watching. I really enjoyed watching him.
I threw Remy Abel in too. While we had him, he was in such a reserve capacity. But at one point, going into the end of the non-conference season as a freshman, he led the country in effective field goal percentage. I mean, he was fun to watch. I wish we could have seen him finish his career out here, but ultimately at the end of the day, because he probably saw a lot of time on the bench, went looking for greener pastures. But Remy's definitely another one of those recent guys that I enjoyed quite a bit while we had him. Sad to see him go. Happy to see him continue to thrive, though. Good kid.
Yep. Yeah, it was cool to see him playing so well in the basketball tournament with Mo Creek for the sideline cancer team. He played really, really well in that as well. Rod Wilmot was another guy that I thought. I mean, he eventually worked his way in, but he was could be instant offense. That spark. He was going to shoot regardless, so you knew that you were getting that from him. But he was another kind of microwave type guy that if he came in could get hot.
He was a freak athlete too, man.
Oh, he was. He was. Absolutely. All right. From Kevin, does Kaufman's reveal of his top 5 in any way change your impression of the probability of him choosing IU? Ryan, did that do anything for you? To me, it didn't change anything for me because it was largely the teams that, I mean, the Indiana State one was a little bit weird, but otherwise, I mean, it's the teams who'd really been recruiting him the most, I think. And so it didn't really change anything for me. Did it for you?
No, and I thought some of the comments he made about Indiana made me feel a little better, talking about how he's got a great relationship with Ostrom and he's talking to him all the time and he loves the coaches and he loves what they're doing and all that. And he's really familiar with the program. That stuff made me feel a little better, but it just feels like the longer this goes on, maybe the worse it is for Indiana as he gets to see other schools and gets to hear from other schools. That doesn't mean anything. That's just a feeling. I don't have any inside information on this one that it's going south, but he seems like a kid who could want to go, just from his previous comments, that could want to go see something else for college. And that's totally fine. I mean, that's his right. I wouldn't be crying tears of pain. If he went to a rival, then you feel like, oh, you lost this guy. But if he goes out of conference, you feel like, well, it's a kid who wanted to get out of Indiana, which is totally fine, for him. But he's a guy who Indiana really wants to get and really could use. And so you want to get him. If you don't, you're bummed about it. But, you can't blame a kid for for living somewhere and then wanting to go see something else for his college years.
Chronic, he's choosing from, aside from 3 in-state schools, which I like, because that's 60% of his top 5. But your other choices, defending national champions recently, I guess, or one of the most prestigious schools in the country. And I actually took a lot of solace in the fact that he went down to Carolina on his own, didn't get the the royal treatment like they normally get there, didn't get to go Instagram in front of the wall of Jordans, and just everything that Carolina does that's got to be so impactful to a teenage kid. To go down to Michael's school, probably get a phone call from him at some point. So I like that. At the end of the day, I was just reading off some of my friends. I took a lot of pleasure in the angst that his omission caused Louisville. I know a lot of folks down there felt like they had a shot at it. So, and honestly, when you look at, I'll recruit against Purdue 7 days a week, twice on Sunday. Obviously, Indiana State, I respect the kid for putting them on the list and recognizing what that staff's done to develop that relationship. But at the end of the day, I always feel better when you see Louisville excluded from the competition, because quite frankly, regionally, that's probably one of Indiana's biggest, competitors for local talent.
That's a great point.
All right. Next question is from Jeff. Ryan, your track record on guys who are on a 1 to 2 year or 2 year plan is impeccable. So I'll throw this one to you. Will Lander be a one and done?
I don't think so. I think he came in early to get 2 years in and then be gone at the time that normally would have been a one and done, because he knew that He got to get in the college strength program, and I think he'll be more prepared leaving instead of being a one and done if he had stayed for his senior year of high school and doing a one and done situation. I think that's why he came early. It reminded me of Race Thompson coming early, and Race Thompson said, "I'm not going to play, but I'm coming in to get in that strength program, so I'm more prepared as a freshman." I think that's kind of what Lander's doing, except for he's going to play. That's the difference. I don't see him being a one and done just because of his lack of size. I think that he certainly has the on-court ability to do that, but I think he really has to get bigger. And I think that if you're going to be that size, you've got to be stronger, you've got to be faster, and you've got to have no holes in your game. And I think that that's why he's coming early is to get all that done.
Yeah,
on a normal timeline.
Yeah, I think of this one a lot along the same lines as you do. I think if I had to answer right now, because he hasn't, you haven't seen him play, it is, even a stretch for somebody his age to be in college basketball right now. I think your lean would have to be that he wouldn't be a one and done. If he ends up being one, I think that says great things probably about how IU season goes, I would imagine, because it means he was playing well enough to be on the court a lot, and he did really well once he got there. So maybe is a win-win situation dependent upon that.
I
Joel's
just saw him on campus. I don't mean to interrupt. I just saw him on campus for the first time, like live last week, just walking around. And that was the one thing that stood out is just how small his body is. You can tell his profile doesn't look like the traditional college student. There's going to be a lot of maturation and development physically, I think, that's going to have to take place before he's legitimately in that conversation for making the next step.
Yeah, and I legitimately think that's why he skipped the senior year, was to get with. So he's got round the clock training for that kind of thing. You can do that in high school. It's just so much harder. You can get a personal trainer or whatever. You get to college, they're on you no matter what. And so I think that's a big part of why he came early. I mean, the fact that he can definitely already play at the college level, I think, but there's a difference between that and making that next jump and the physicality involved and the fact that you're playing twice as many games. If you don't make the playoffs, all of that, I think that had a lot to do with why he's on campus when he is.
We talk about the strength and conditioning, and what gets lost in that is just the total wellness program IU puts together and all the colleges put together. Everything from planned recovery time that's really scientifically managed, the training tables. I mean, the fuel that these athletes put in their body and what it allows them to get out of it. I don't know that you can understate just how big all of that package is into the development of these guys. Don't get me wrong. Cliff Marshall does an amazing job, as we saw from those photos that got posted, particularly of Anthony Leal. I mean, he's like one step away from going full Wolverine. But that's just such a huge part of that whole process. You could have your mom could be the best cook in the world, and it's not like going to training tables. It's not like the downtime with Coach Marshall, Tim Garl, and the entire wellness staff they have there, and the way in which they really get the most out of these athletes physically.
All right. Next is from Joel. If the Maui Invitational is moved to Indianapolis, which has been floated, I heard, will that be the date for the Assembly Call social distancing meetup? I don't know. We'd have to figure out how to make that work depending upon the timing. It would be convenient, and Ryan could still potentially be there to cover the event, albeit in a different location that he would be happier about than Asheville, North Carolina. So maybe it's possible. But the real reason we picked this one is we can we'll wrap this segment with this question. Ryan was curious how many Padres questions that we would get. Sadly, only one. Joel's question was, if the Padres had a serviceable catcher, would they still be 4.5 games back of the Dodgers?
Probably not. They traded for one. They've got Austin Nola now, who's, I think his batting average is the highest among catchers in baseball. But they had Austin Hedges, who was one of the worst offensive players in all of the baseball. I think he hit 173 last year. Great defender, terrible behind the plate, or terrible at the plate. They actually completely blew up their catching situation, traded for 2 catchers, and then brought up a 21-year-old rookie as their sort of other catchers. So the catching situation, Joel, I'm fine with it. Problem is they spent most of the year without these guys. So that has a lot to do with why they're 4.5 behind the Dodgers.
The Dodgers are amazing this year.
They are. I love them. It's so much fun.
Well, I was glad. It's just nice. We joked about this in between segments, but it's nice to see a San Diego team bring Ryan so much joy. So I had to throw
it's
in
the first time in
it's
like 30
legitimately
years.
the first time since I've known Ryan that any team there has brought him any joy whatsoever. So it's you know,
No
what are you
coincidence.
gonna
The
do?
whole state's on fire this year, but that's
I
not
know.
here nor there.
I know.
that's
It's
a-
like, yeah,
That's a separate issue. That's
definitely.
yeah, that's kind of par for the course. Things are evening out there, I guess.
Look, Chicago didn't burn down when they won their title. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. We got plenty of problems out here. We really do.
They got that out of the way like a century earlier.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to take a break, and we'll come back and hit the rest of the questions, including one from our friend Bob Thompson about a comparison of the IU football and basketball program. So we'll hit that one first. When we come back, stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Gonna do a little bit of math here.
I've done plenty enough of that with e-learning. I'll leave that to you.
It's like, yeah. Right now, just very happy we have chosen not to have children at this point.
You know, the biggest struggle right now that we're having with e-learning is, even though they had, some run up and they ironed some wrinkles out, like none of the system was ever designed to be fully online.
Yeah.
So like, we had, we use Canvas, this online system, and the dashboard's clunky. You got to go to a dozen different sites to see what all's up in the air. And so much of the curriculum now is like, here's a link for part of your assignment, watch this video on YouTube and then write a report about it. But we just had one of the Karens in the community caught her kid watching something on YouTube. Maybe just didn't want them on YouTube at all. And now the district has barred YouTube from all of its devices, so there went like a third of the curriculum.
Oh, well, that's going to be.
Can you just
Yeah,
put like a parental control on it or something? I don't know.
I don't know.
I think you can. I don't know how well it works on there, but there are some that you can do. I don't know.
Gotcha.
I think
I didn't even know
I
if that
think there's
existed.
even like a YouTube Kids version or something. I don't know. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that we had last year with, some of it was a lot of, hey, go watch this video and then do something like you said. And then, my wife's down recording herself, trying to do stuff to make it as much like in person as she possibly could. And so I just think there's no, I think at the time there just wasn't a lot of standard for like, hey, this is how it should be done or whatever else. And everybody's using different technology platforms that none of which were built to sustain the influx of people that they soon would. And so that was a lot of her time with people just complaining like, well, this is down, this is down, this is down. Well, it's like, I'm sure nobody in their right mind had scoped the hardware for this stuff to be able to handle what they needed to do, unfortunately.
One of my favorite stories from quarantine is that in China, I think it was China or Japan, but I can't remember. They sent kids home and they had to get on an app to do all of their work. And all of the kids figured out they gave the app 1-star review. And if it gets enough 1-star reviews, it gets removed from the Apple Store. And so they actually
that's a lesson really in and of itself for the kids.
I mean,
so
how can you be mad?
You can't
at
say
them
there's
for
no
being
learning
that
that went on.
Yeah.
I thought we were
loads of
geniuses when
kids-
we found the test in the photocopier, after the teachers run off all the.
Those kids, those kids are going to grow up and be geniuses. Like they can solve any problem. I love it.
Problem solving. That's all that is.
Exactly.
They're learning at home. Who says they're not?
All right, we got a little bit over 10 minutes. We got 10:24 left to hit as many of the rest of these as we can. So
cool.
I will keep you guys updated as we go.
They're in segment 3. Okay, I was looking.
Yeah, sorry, I moved them because I needed the
Gotcha.
intro, which still has the wrong people's names in it. So I'm gonna fix that so I don't just read this straight off of here, which I have probably done in the past.
He'll read anything you put in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've
He's
definitely.
Ron Burgundy.
There was a time or two that I think we've done. I think Coach and I have both fallen victim to that occasionally. So I'm in good company at least. All right.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open 3, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Chronic Hoosier and Ryan Phillips. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right, we're continuing our AMA, and we've got a handful of questions left to hit here, so hopefully we can squeeze them all in. This one comes from Bob Thompson, who does all the intro songs and a lot of the music that you hear on the show. So in addition to that, he threw out a good question here. So listening to Tom Allen on Hoosier Hysterics got me pumped. I feel really optimistic about the future of both IU football and IU basketball, but tell me which program has more reason to be optimistic and why? Chronic, I'll throw that one to you first.
I've made this analogy for some time now. I feel like both teams are very much on parallel tracks, ascendant. I think they're building the program the way that both need to, given where they sit respectively. As far as which one is most likely to hit the mountaintop first, I'm going to say IU football. And basketball should be easier. It's just less pieces. There's just a lot less going on. But I do feel like Tom Allen's got the Hoosiers in a special spot. I like their prospects. I love the confidence of the team. I love the culture he's building. I don't necessarily love that this season is going to be so wonky because of whatever. I don't even know if we have a season, but I feel really bad that they kind of push pause on this team's progress going forward. And maybe I feel differently about how Archie's team stacks up after they get a chance to play a little bit. It's just really unfortunate, but I really do like what's happening with both of them. And I think both of them are on the cusp of putting something together that could last for some time if they choose for it to. But I think right now, just based off most recent records, I feel like Tom Allen's just slightly ahead in that.
Right.
Yeah, I think I could see that argument. I think that what makes it more difficult for the football program is that they haven't had, they're not a marquee program that you look at in their region. If you're looking at the Big Ten, you look at Ohio State, you look at whatever. And so that might hold kids back a little bit from wanting to go there and look without the players. And he's done well in recruiting, certainly the best that Indiana has ever done, it feels like. But I think that there's still a little trepidation until you do start to see higher level success to get those top, in-state kids to stay. I think he's done pretty well, but I think that it's just going to take a little bit more time. Whereas I feel like Indiana has built the basketball program to a point where, if they get a good run going, they could be a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament that makes a run with that system in a tournament style setting. So I would say IU basketball, but I'd say I feel good about where both programs are. And also it's, I know this happens at a lot of schools, but it's really interesting to see how both programs are mirror images of their coaches, are just the basketball program looks like you would expect Archie Miller to build a basketball program, and the football program looks exactly like you would feel Tom Allen, how Tom Allen will build a program too. They are reflections of their coach, and it's really interesting to see that.
Yeah, I think it's a great sign. There's even I think it's a great sign. There's even a debate for this. Maybe some would say, take the other side of that and say, well, if the answer is not absolutely positively basketball, something is not going right. But I do think it's interesting to contrast the two when we've talked about IU's progress over Archie's tenure and that it's been slow and kind of smaller steps versus I think you'd seen more of those bigger leaps from the football program getting to where they did last year. So, but like Chronic said, everything was really set up well for them this year, and hopefully that still is able to come to fruition if and when the season is able to start. But you really hope that doesn't slow that momentum too much and maybe make this season a little bit of another small step as opposed to a bigger one like what we've seen.
And how much does this conversation change if football doesn't have the division that IU football sits in, if they're not in the Big Ten East?
Yeah,
that's probably a lot.
A big impact. Yeah, certainly.
Probably a lot. All right, next one. I'll take the next one. So Lee sent in, can the new IU coach, I assume he means Kenya Hunter here, improve three-point shooting, or do we rely on Ryan, the shot doctor? I don't know that Kenya Hunter comes with any credentials as a shot doctor per se, but I'm not sure that Ryan is going to do this work without getting paid. So we may have to put our eggs in the Kenya Hunter basket, or at least in other coaches and drills that these guys will be doing. So I'll take that.
They've got to have some extra money laying around for me. I'm saying.
Who knows? All right, next question from Todd is still at home. My daughter is a freshman on campus this year. What are the odds of her being able to see an IU basketball game in person, or should we just assume it's not going to happen because it will be in a bubble somewhere? Ryan, I'll throw this one to you first. What are the odds there? I don't know that the conference bubble is all that likely to happen, but I don't know that is the influencer of whether fans will actually be able to be at the games or not, even if they don't do the bubble. So do you think there's any fans at college basketball game or an IU college basketball game this season?
Since day one of this, I've been saying no fans still until 2021. But hey, the NFL has fans right now in a socially distance fashion. I don't know how smart that is, but they're doing it, and there's rumors that baseball may do it for the playoffs. They're going to see how it goes with the NFL, and maybe they'll do that for the playoffs. I would assume it's a low percentage just because college campuses are a little bit different than professional athletes and adults making those decisions. So I'd assume it's low level, but I would never say never if things all of a sudden just turn around and get better. It's been hard to predict this thing since the beginning as far as ebbs and flows. We've known the ultimate result from the beginning, but there have been individual ebbs and flows in certain states and areas that have been unpredictable. So yeah, I don't know what the world's going to look like in January of 2021. I don't know what it's going to look like for the Big Ten Conference, and I don't think they'll do a bubble though. I think that they'll do is try and copy the baseball football model where people are getting tested constantly. They're going to games and then they're going home, and they have rules that they have to follow and all of that stuff. I think that's what they're going to go for.
Chronic, what about you?
I think that's one thing that let me back this up, I guess, first. Did you say game or games? Because that may be an important delineation.
She says it just said odds of her being able to see IU basketball in person this year. So it doesn't specify. So I suppose it could just be once.
Yes. I like her odds, and I like her odds because as a student, I think they're going to get some preference. As far as attendance, I do think it's going to be a greatly reduced capacity. But along those lines, IU's mitigation testing efforts right now are pretty robust, assuming that the testing stays available to them. So I think that could be something that you see, kind of conditioned upon your receipt of tickets for a game, or maybe a couple of them, depending on what, how many home games you have on the slate. Is that okay? Everybody who's got tickets to the Tuesday night game, you've got a test that you've got to pass on Monday, COVID test you've got to pass in order to go to the game. So there's an infrastructure in place that actually allows that to happen. I think so much of that though too is going to be determined by what happens between now and the start of the season on campus, because like we said earlier, things are kind of precariously perched right now, and they're holding together as best they can. I do feel better about her odds that she's not at a Greek house at IU. That'll give her that. She's got that in her favor as well. So we'll see if we get there. If we do get there, I think you'll probably see an opportunity for kids to attend at least one, maybe a couple.
All right. Well, that made me feel a little bit better.
Optimistic. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. So, all right, Ed, this is kind of a related question. In the event that college basketball is played without fans in attendance, would you be open to or opposed to Assembly Hall pumping in crowd noise like MLB and others do? Ryan, quick thoughts on this one?
I think if it's a low level kind of hum like white noise, I'm fine with it. I don't want them doing what the A's are doing where it goes up and down in wild stretches and things like that. If it's like a low level baseline hum, so you're not just hearing echoes the whole time, I kind of am cool with that. Baseball, I think, has done a pretty good job in general with that. Some places not as good as others, but I'm fine with the little low level hum. And hey, maybe you let them do what the NBA does and pipe in some music or whatever, just to keep the atmosphere.
All right, Chronic, I'm going to throw this next one to you from Paul. Gun to your head, you had to root for one or the other, Purdue or Kentucky, if they played each other in the finals some year. Who would you root for? He talked about probably pulling for Purdue since they're Big Ten. Most of the kids are from Indiana. So what would you do in that horrific scenario, Chronic?
I'd just say pull the trigger, man. That's an option too, right? Gun to the head. I mean, there's an option C. I think if it ultimately came down to it, it'd probably be the most painful game I ever watched. I'd probably end up pulling for Purdue. I dislike Kentucky that much. I don't need to hear them talk about their most recent banner that, their 12 NBA players achieved for them. At the end of the day, we never hear the end of it from Purdue fans, but you could always smack them down with math too. So I'd go there. I will say though, going back to the other question that we just had, I hate the fake crowd noise. College is absolutely situated though for its own noise. One of the best parts about the college game, you got the big red band. It's literally one of the best traditions there. Just play their tunes, man, and don't worry about the artificial stuff.
I didn't think about that. That's a good call.
Everything's
That's it.
so
We're
weird
done.
right
No more
now.
questions.
Let it
All
be
right.
what it is.
All right, we got to wrap, folks. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you heard on tonight's show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, Freddie Mac Swain Jr. Keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim. And man, go up and dunk the ball. Go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
all right.
Hard out.
Sorry.
Chronic a little there.
Sorry, we can.
No worries. I had to get that one in though. I hate the crowd noise, but I absolutely think college would be awesome if you just played the bands.
Yeah, I
think
that's a great option. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could figure out some things to make it work well enough that it would be okay.
I think you got to put it on a 4-second or whatever the delay necessary though, so you can mute out the F-bombs, because a quiet gym, I mean, as we've seen, it's just
yeah.
But I think that's what's part of what makes this so wild is it's unprecedented, and I freaking hate saying that word. We've never experienced this before. It's totally unprecedented. I think it's journalist's job, whether it's print or broadcast, paint the scene. Let it be what it is. Don't try to manipulate it just because it's something that we're most comfortable with. It's weird as hell for the athletes to be playing in a cavernous, completely quiet environment. Let's experience what they're seeing that way.
Yeah, I think it's actually, it seems like the NBA guys have kind of I wouldn't say enjoyed it, but relatively, because they're playing in a small, intimate place. It's easy to get that energy going, but playing in a big, Assembly Hall is big and empty, echoing around there, that'd be rough, I think. But, the NBA guys have been able to there's no crowd to worry about, no cavernous, things, and they're playing these tiny gyms, and they're actually the basketball has actually been really good in the NBA bubble. It's been better than some regular season games.
And I think they've done a great job. I find myself getting distracted with all the bullshit that's on the back walls, all the screens and everything else. And I get why you're doing it, and I understand all of it. I just don't like it. It's distracting. Again, let's paint it as it is.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep. I would agree. I mean, it's been fun to watch, and I don't know how much of that. I mean, I probably watched maybe more NBA than I would normally.
Yeah, agreed. Because there's nothing. There was nothing else on at the start.
Really anything else on. But yeah, it is kind of, in a certain extent, you'd like to be able to hear some of the chatter and the talking on the court and things like that. I think parts of that could be cool. You've got the profanity component that Chronic referenced that is going to be likely challenging to work around in that capacity. But
it has been cool hearing the baseball benches yelling at the umpires, or you're hearing like a guy hits the ball and you're hearing the guys yell. And I mean, that's actually been really fun to see how involved, because usually you don't notice how involved baseball players are during the course of a game. And it's just like high school games, like they're talking the whole time.
I can't remember what coach I just saw. A football coach was talking about one of the biggest challenges, not challenges, but differences, is you can actually verbally audible at the line of scrimmage now. Like the coaching staff can call audibles into the quarterback and to the team because there's no crowd noise to drown it out.
Instead of hand signal, yeah.
Yeah. So
the Chargers are going to be in great shape with no fans. It's been going on for years, man.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see once they get started with that, like how much of a difference that really makes in some of these.
Well, and the other thing
places
is
not having people versus ones that let some people in versus, what I mean. But aren't there only like 2 that are actually letting fans in?
Chiefs had like 18,000 tonight, I think.
Yeah, I forget what the number was. They had it, but I think there's only like maybe 1 or 2 others that are allowing fans, at least as of now. Who knows what that looks like later? But who knows? Yeah,
all right, crazy.
All right, we only came up a couple questions short, but I think we can leave those others if we want and hit them another mailbag time. So we did well. We got through a lot. So
thanks for coming on, Chronic. It's always good to see you, man.
Hey, it's always good to be back. I got a new gig, and it's the nights are so variable anymore. I told Jared I'd love to join, and it's been a really, really slow week, but without fail, every time you put something on the books, when the schedule goes sideways on you. So
yeah, that never fails for sure.
It's a rule of thumb. I was just happy to be able to hold to the plan, and like I said earlier, man, I'm just happy to talk about stuff, sports,
fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, kind of like Ryan was saying, I think before the show, sometimes it's a little bit of a grind to go through and have to, go through the post game shows. But man, at this point, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds pretty good right about now. I actually have a game to talk about.
Well, we've all had busy summers too. I mean, we've rarely had everybody on together just because we've all had so much stuff going on with, your families all being at home and having to do all that stuff. And, it's crazy. It's been craziness.
It's amazing how the lack of activity and travel outside of the house during the day really compresses the time that you have away from work.
Yeah.
You're not making those, quick errand here on my way to work or from, or going to lunch or whatever, where you can kind of multitask. Now you got to cram all that into whenever you log off after work. And it's wild. And somehow the weekend,
it's weird that
and the logging off is harder when you're already working at home anyway. So
you never log off. You're always on.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's weird how days seem to go by faster. Like it feels like there's fewer hours in the day, but it also seems like this is taking forever, at the same time. Like,
well, the calendar doesn't matter anymore. I mean, every
no,
day
not
is
at
just
all.
another day. Weekends don't matter. It's just
every day my girlfriend wakes up and asks me what day it is. Like she just completely has no, and half the time I'm waking up like, was yesterday Tuesday? Yeah, it was Tuesday. No, it was Monday. Okay, yeah.
No, it's March 211th.
Yeah, I think you said thank you.
That checks out.
All right, guys.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for joining us, Chronic. Thanks everybody for being here, and everybody stay safe and enjoy the NFL this weekend if you're so inclined. And we'll be back next week.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Later, guys.
See you guys.